CEO recently said that we're entering a new era of sustainability-driven business transformation. And we fundamentally believe that industries will be reinvented over the coming few years in pursuit of decarbonization, and that cloud technologies will be a key enabler in helping to facilitate that, both AI and other technologies. So we want to use the panel today to explore that. Now on Google Cloud, we want to create an ecosystem of climate tech entrepreneurs, of startups who are harnessing cloud technologies to facilitate this change. I very much believe that much of the innovation will come from entrepreneurs and climate tech startups. So I'm really delighted that we've got a few here today. In Google Cloud, we've created a designation called Google Cloud Ready Sustainability. And we've now validated 40 climate tech companies who are building their businesses on Google Cloud. And so we want to bring that alive today to hear how they're harnessing AI and geospatial analytics, because of course within Google, we have Google Earth Engine, which brings 20 years of 80 petabytes of geospatial data that many companies are now harnessing. And we believe that these tools will be very helpful for companies in their pursuit of decarbonization and building climate resilience. So that's the kind of context for today's discussion. And we've got a really exciting panel. We've got 3 representatives of the climate tech ecosystem, and they're building their businesses on Google Cloud. But of course, we also need finance. So we're delighted that Natalie Blythe is here from HSBC to give us perspective about the role of finance in supporting that climate tech ecosystem. And then in the wider context of transformation, we're delighted to have Francis Way here from the Climate Champions, who've done an incredible work over the last 5 or 6 years in coalescing industry movements for transformation. So that's a bit of the context. I think we're going to start with some perspectives and an introduction from our climate tech community. So Ray, perhaps I can start with you. If you could introduce yourself and Tomorrow, and just tell us a bit about the organization.
Sure. Well, great to be here. Thank you for having us. So I'm Ray Gopher. I'm one of the co-founders of Tomorrow.io, also Chief Strategy Officer. Tomorrow.io is a weather intelligence company. We are building a vertically integrated platform to provide weather intelligence, weather insights at scale for everybody on the planet. By vertically integrated, that means we're building observations. We're sending satellites to space. We have weather radars already orbiting space today. We're building weather forecasting models, so using the observations to feed AI-based models, obviously down on the cloud. And most importantly, we're serving a platform to end users, which gives insights. So translating the forecast into actions for every type of user. We serve a couple hundred customers ranging from airlines and logistics and trucking companies all the way to smallholder farmers in Kenya. And they're all using the same exact platform that gives them weather translated and contextualized to their needs. And that's Tomorrow.io.
Great, thanks, Ray. Engineer, welcome. Love to hear more about you and Airco.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Engineer Bainom Gisha, and I'm from Airco. Airco is a Ugandan-based initiative that is building local sensors to help African cities monitor and track air pollution. We are focusing on this problem because air pollution is a major issue, not only in Africa, but globally, responsible for over 7 million people die every year due to air pollution-related illnesses. And for the last 7 or so years, we've been building low-cost sensors. We started out in Uganda, but now we are in over 8 countries in 10 cities across African continent. And our technology stack starts from building sensors, deploying these sensors in cities, transmitting this data onto our cloud-based platforms, based on Google platform, BigQuery data systems, and then we build data insights to make this data actionable to cities for policymakers, for policymaking, but also for communities to take decisions in terms of reducing their exposure to air pollution, and also in terms of advice, in terms of what they can do to improve air quality. So that's brief about Airco. Our vision is to have clean air for all African cities.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, engineer. Andrew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Zale. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at an organization called Planet. We're best known for having designed, built, and operating the largest constellation of satellites that observe the Earth in history. Those satellites collectively image the entire surface of the Earth every day in high resolution. So we see every act of deforestation, the growth of every crop in every field, every road, every building, every refugee camp, everywhere, every day. We also operate several other kinds of satellites. One I'll just mention just to give you the full spectrum as it relates directly to the work we're doing here. The conversation today is a suite of satellites that we've jointly developed with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which we're putting up in the first quarter of this coming year, so right after the new year, which will be the highest point source methane emissions detections instruments in history, allowing us to see exactly where all kinds of methane emissions and CO2 and CH4 emissions are happening globally. We're a public benefit corporation. Our entire focus is on this sector, so we're really excited, and what these guys do is amazing. Really
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Natalie, perhaps I could switch to you. It'd be great to hear about how HSBC is supporting this climate tech ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So Natalie Blythe, Global Head of the Commercial Banking Sustainability. We're a bank, so people think, right, that's the money bags. But actually, it's more than that. If you think about to get to net zero, more than or about half the technology, it exists, but it's not commercialized yet. So we need to finance this new technology, but we also need to facilitate and the scale up and create the ecosystems with partners like Google to enable that to really accelerate the scale up and commercialization of the technology that's needed to get to net zero. So I can talk about the priorities later, but that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
And then Francis, if you could give us the big picture, particularly the role of the climate champions and also how you're supporting these types of ecosystems.
Sure. So I'm Frances Way. I'm Executive Director of the Climate Champions team, and we support the two UN climate change high-level champions. These are people who are appointed by the COP presidency each year. They each have a 2-year term. They work in partnership. So our current high-level champions are Dr. Mahmoud Mohoudin from COP27, Egypt, and Her Excellency Razan Al Mubrak from the United Arab Emirates for COP28. And together they have this role that was established in 2015 in Paris with previous champions before us. And the role is to really drive ambition and mobilize more action in the non-party stakeholders, so separate from the negotiations, to really show what's happening in the real economy, what's happening in private finance, what's happening at the subnational level with civil society, and bring that back and bridge it back into the negotiations to really help us get to the implementation and solutions on a sort of more multi-stakeholder level that are going to work. So that's really the role.
Fantastic. Thanks, Francis. Natalie, I think I'll come straight to you about your priorities, if I may, particularly the role that you're playing in bringing finance to the innovation space.
Yeah. So we have committed to net zero, and we have our CEO and chairman and chief sustainability officer leading on a number of initiatives as well. But it's really about mobilizing capital, supporting our clients, and really developing the new economy. And in the commercial bank, we've got 3 levers in a Venn diagram because it's this ecosystem that's really critical. So the first lever is to be the trusted partner to transition all of our clients. So think of those, of the clients of today. Some of those are hard to abate, and we need to sort of get the tools in place and the data and the AI tooling to assist them transition. The second one, because of who we are in trade, which is, and supply chains, number 1 by a factor of 2, it's all about the sustainable supply chain ecosystems. So that's where you get a massive amplification and multiplier effect. And then the third lever, which has got 2 bookends, is to be the bank of choice for the new economy. It is going to take trillions just in the new economy to get the infrastructure there, so the climate infrastructure that's necessary. Some of that's mature, like wind, solar, EV, but others like hydrogen, much more nascent. And then there is the sort of the climate tech startups. And it can be quite uncomfortable for banks to sort of finance and invest in those startups. The capital treatment is quite an intensive process. The technologies are sort of nascent and unknown. They don't have the financial sort of track record. So we need to come up with novel ways of sort of mobilizing the capital. And we did a lot of this in COVID, actually, leveraging sort of de-risking with the multilateral development banks. So it's those three levers, but combined together in a Venn diagram. And you can see that to assist those clients, 1.3 million of them, in lever one to transition needs those climate tech companies and the infrastructure for lever three. So it's connecting, and it's a sort of a new imagination of the HSBC network and our partners like you.
Do you see yourself almost being a broker between that climate tech ecosystem and your commercial customers?
Absolutely, absolutely. So those commercial clients need to be introduced to the technology that's going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We were talking earlier about all the predictive analytics that we can have to anticipate what's likely to happen. So it's not just mitigation, but it's adaptation as well. And if you can predict how to adapt and have that data. Data is so crucial, not just from a defense, but from an offense perspective as well. So yeah, we finance, we absorb and mitigate risk, but we facilitate. And it's that sort of convening power that we really need to leverage across our network of clients of today and tomorrow, and our partners. Yeah.
Fantastic. Maybe I can come to Ray, engineer, and Andrew. If you think about the kind of the political context that we've heard about, there's the role of finance and the role of technology. It'd be great to hear, what are your big priorities right now to grow your businesses? Ray.
Sure. So we have first priority is we have 20 some more satellites to put in space to cover the entire globe within less than 1 hour revisit rate, see every drop of water that hits the surface of the Earth on the planet. And that's quite a challenging undertaking, but we're well on our way. And at the same time, we're starting to really scale the business. One direction I'll mention here is actually working with governments, especially in developing countries, to equip them with the tools. There is this gigantic gap in capabilities of weather services in developing countries because of traditional infrastructure is extremely expensive and complex to operate. And with new technologies, with cloud, with new space, you can now dramatically reduce the cost and complexity of those systems and offer countries in Africa and Latin America, island nations, a much better solution, essentially leapfrogging the generations of technology and becoming global leaders at a far lower cost and at a far faster time. And so that's what we're really focused on, working with many countries already doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Our current priorities are really on expansion, geo-expansion. We know that for us to start talking about, the impacts of, climate change, air pollution in our cities, we need to have, evidence to actually understand the scale and magnitude of air pollution across the communities. And we are expanding our network. Our goal is to, reach 10 countries by the end of the year, which is, by end of next year, which is just coming up. We are currently already in 8 countries and 10 cities, including, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, Madagascar, Cameroon, Senegal, Kenya, Burundi, and others. So once we have the network in terms of the data, our other priority is in ensuring that this data is actually being used to drive action. And action here means, policy, but also in terms of, commitment to reduce the pollution levels that we are seeing. So we work actively with cities. Every city we go in, we establish collaborations with the city leaders to see that this can be translated into policy and action. Our other priority is on education and awareness as we inform actions for the future, but we also need to protect the lives that are exposed to dangerous emissions, currently. So we are building tools to enable communities and individuals to understand their exposure and use this data to minimize, risks to our exposures of air pollution. Thank you.
And engineer, do they do that on their phones? How do they access that information?
Yeah, so we're building tools for digital access. One is the phone, the mobile app. Our data, once it has gone through the cloud processing and AI, quality assurance, and so on, prediction, we deliver this on a mobile phone.
Right.
So build an app, users can use to track. But also, we know that some of our users, especially the communities we serve, are not necessarily on a mobile phone, the smartphones particularly. So we're also thinking about how can we ensure that our information can reach a citizen somewhere in a rural community that does not have a smartphone. And for that, we're integrating our API with television stations so they can broadcast this data during the news broadcasts. Also radio stations, radio presenters who have access to our app.
Yes.
They can read this information and share with the public who are offline, not connected to the internet.
Great. Thanks, engineer. Andrew.
One of the things first of all, given the truly expert curation that you've brought to bear, right? You've got finance and policy and tech. I think the thing that's interesting is to watch how do we make progress against the global goals? How do we actually, we have a clock, before I give this, your address to the question, we have a clock in our office that we're counting down the number of days to 2030. We actually literally look at it every single day, right? So that when I left, it was about 2,277 days that we have left. So we really have to catalyze rapid change. And it's interesting to watch the relationship between the introduction of the identification of a problem, the introduction of transformational new technology approaches, like are represented by our colleagues over here, and by Planet, and the way in which when we get sufficiently confident in the technological ability, particularly to measure, because these are all measurement technologies that are up here today, then we see new regulation comes along that says, can you fulfill, right, using those technologies, can we actually now mandate a change in behavior? And that spurs new markets in those behaviors, new ways of taking that data and then act. So let me give you the example, and this goes to the answer to the question that you raised, which is that there are many examples of things that are happening like this right now, but one in particular is on the strength of our ability now to monitor the whole planet every day and to see every act of deforestation as it occurs, to be able to quantify, classify it. We now see regulations coming in, and the Europeans have a major package of regulations that were introduced called the EU Deforestation Regulations, or EUDR. They mandate, starting in 2025, that no goods in a whole suite of that use a whole suite of commodity products. So this is like soy, coffee, timber, and the products that are based on them. So packaging, all of those things. None of them can be imported to or through the European Union if they are linked to deforestation, forest degradation, or other environmental impacts against a baseline year a few years ago. So the compliance costs alone for EUDR are more than $6 billion a year. The number of goods that are covered are something like $130 billion in trade. And the only way we're actually going to be able to mandate, to validate, is with these kinds of technologies. So the technology triggers exist for a while in this early stage, like you guys are building out the infrastructure, and then regulation comes along and new markets form, and that's just one of many that I think we're really interested in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. I want to kind of shift the conversation to talk a bit about AI.
Yeah.
In the title of this session, we've talked about the need for accelerating climate action.
Sure.
And so I think there's a question about the role that AI might play as an accelerator. And Francis, perhaps I could start with you to ask whether you see AI featuring in the kind of current discourse.
Sure, absolutely, and I think it's really interesting actually to hear this panel and particularly our experts and entrepreneurs, because I mean, for those of you who might not be aware that for the COP presidency today is Health Day, and for the Marrakesh Partnership that we help curate, it's actually Resilience Day, and we're hearing quite a lot about resilience. And I have to credit Justin, actually, with when he started this role, he actually came to the COP26 high-level champion, I believe, and said, how can we help on resilience? Because AI is, doing quite a lot on energy efficiency, sort of how to take kind of the lower carbon options in terms of our personal lives. But it often speaks to quite a sort of global north, almost affluent kind of lifestyle of how to make your life easier. There's the sort of joke about the sort of laundry apps of, how you can sort of get your laundry done quickly without actually thinking
Dating
about
apps
work.
for cats
Yeah.
is my standard
So
example.
I think, the fact that AI can really be used, be leveraged in a way to help the 4 billion people in the global south that are going to be the vulnerable people that are going to be really feeling the impacts of climate change by 2030 is really important. And because of that, I mean, should I speak about our initiative now or should I speak about it later? Okay, so in September, during the week of UNGA in New York, New York Climate Week, the high-level champions actually partnered with, it was both google.org and google.com. And we did a design sprint looking at how AI could help on resilience. We run a campaign called the Race to Resilience, and we actually had a lot of wonderful women groups who are one of our partners with Sheila Patel for Roof Over Our Heads, a whole lot of women living in informal settlements, really in charge of building their own structures, but not sort of legally recognized in any way as owners, and having to make these more resilient, because they lose everything every time there's a sort of storm or something. And what came out of that exciting design sprint is the idea for a resilient planet initiative with 3 elements. So firstly, the Resilient Planet Data Hub, then secondly, the Resilient Planet Solutions Hub, and thirdly, the Resilient Planet Exchange. And this is really, sort of thinking about how we bring in different partners with the data, with the solutions, with the expertise, to really equip the people who are on the front line, who don't have, the sort of tools that they need, and help them become more resilient in their communities, in their cities, in their businesses. So sort of all contributing to that. And we'll be launching that with an event on the 8th of December at 4:45 in the Resilience Hub.
Thank you, Francis. I forgot that you were going to mention that. Within Google, we have brands that are used by over 1 billion users every day. You think about search and Android. And so we really feel a responsibility to be able to use that technology to be helpful for individuals. And when we think about vulnerability to extreme weather, extreme heat, we've got a big role to play. Last year, we launched something called Flood Hub, which now delivers alerts to 480 million people at risk from flooding, has a 7-day advance warning. And that's just one example of where we think we can use Google technology to support the resilience agenda. But of course, something like Flood Hub is entirely reliant on AI as an enabler to enable that type of predictability. And so that's a great example of where we can see these technologies coming together to support climate resilience. Maybe to the rest of the panel, to understand how you're harnessing AI. Andrew?
First of all, I really love that point, both of those points. So let's, just as a framing device, because we are living, our organization is a data and AI organization, as I imagine all of us think of ourselves in this way. So first of all, Google's doing amazing stuff. Just, if you wouldn't mind, let me speak admiringly about some things that you guys are doing. Google used its own AI techniques to optimize the energy efficiency of its data centers and found very significant savings in just the core operations of those data centers. And now is experimenting in taking those optimization strategies, which are entirely AI-driven, and connecting them to the systems that you see above our heads, those of you who are here physically, the HVAC systems, the operating systems for the physical plants of the buildings of the world. If we can use those tools of AI to drive ecological efficiency, we can substantially accelerate emissions reductions. There's a huge opportunity there, and it's led by the kind of data analytics. But I'd like to give another example. This is only inferentially about Google. So we might ask, and I hope I'm not being too cheeky, like, what made Google Google? Well, the first thing they ever did, you'll recall, is they came up with a very clever way to index the internet, and specifically to understand the relevance of what's on the internet, on the web. And if it was all that they did, then all of us, to use Google, would go down to a librarian at our local library, and we'd ask a technically trained person to access that index. But of course, that's not what they did. What they did was they put that index behind the world's easiest to use user interface. We have spent a lot of time in these circles talking about capacity development. Do you notice that no one talks about capacity development in regards to Google, right? Google solved the capacity problem on the other side of the screen. And that moment is going to happen here with all of this kind of data. That's what AI is going to do. Right, so that breaks down into two pieces. The first one is to index the Earth, much like our colleagues at Google indexed the web and indexed the internet, right? Once you've said, okay, we know, here's the spatially explicit model of weather and air pollution and all of the other phenomena that are happening on the Earth, we'll be able to allow people to ask questions of that kind of information. And then things are going to go supernova. And we're literally on the moment right now. We're at the fulcrum point on the seesaw when it flips from the library science era of climate data to the search bar era of climate data. And when that happens, not only your mother, but your minister will actually be able to use these things with efficiency and ask questions in plain English. That's the exciting thing that I think there are many, many other applications of AI, but that's one that I particularly am really excited about.
Thanks, Sanjay. Great.
Yeah, just to build on Andrew's point, I think it really is that moment where we're starting to see the transition of, okay, there's a lot of knowledge, spread. Now, I want to give a particular example of a project we have going in Kenya together with our nonprofit spin out Tomorrow Now. So we work with over 1 million farmers right now, rural farmers, smallholder farmers in Kenya, who for many years, used to get or try to get agricultural advice on mobile phones. And it is really hard because the Kenya in particular, but most other countries, they have microclimates, and your plot is very different than a plot next to you in weather and climate, and that means you need to do different things with regards to when you plant, whether or not you fertilize today, what type of seeds you should use, and so on. Now scale that by 8 million farmers just in Kenya alone, a couple hundred millions globally, that becomes a really challenging topic. And it's all environmentally driven, right? It's all driven by externalities, in our case, mostly weather, right? Because if you plant and there's 4 dry days, then your seeds are not going to grow and you've lost your crop for the season, which can be a disaster for a family. And so how do you help do that is exactly what we're focused on. So we combine the weather conditions with our partners at the Kenyan government, KADRO, which is a Kenyan Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization. They have this huge database powered by Google as well, with literally the soil type, the geo tags of each individual field, millions of them, so that we can together tell each farmer in your specific plot for your specific crop soil, in that angle and elevation you are on the side of the mountain, here's what you should do this coming week. And it gets sent as few words in a text message to not complicate it with everything behind it, right? That's all it does, and it does it at scale for millions of farmers. It takes huge amount of technology behind it, but as is the example with the Google search engine, the user interface is very, very simple, right? And so that, I think, is maybe the most interesting example and powerful example of how AI can help us really help with climate, because this is adaptation. We need these farmers to be able to be productive, and in fact, we need them to increase their productivity by about 50% in the next few decades. We're not going to be able to do it unless we start implementing these tools at scale.
Yeah. So it's almost AI is not only is it helping to drive the compute and insight, but it's also creating interfaces that are much simpler to use and more accessible for individuals, right?
Yeah.
Engineer, maybe to you, how are you harnessing AI in the context of ERCO?
Yeah, so ERCO, primarily, we are collecting high-resolution data And this data, as it accumulates, we have billions of records of data on air quality across the cities where we have our network in. And this data gets into the data store. We're using BigQuery, which is a Google technology. And once the data is there, one of the things that we actually have to do is the calibration of this data, local sensors. And we are leveraging machine learning models for that to calibrate the local sensor data to improve the accuracy and reliability. Then once we have that data, it brings us to the next step of how do we drive actionable insights from this data. And again, this is where AI and machine learning technologies are very good at. So we are able to use data to do prediction in space and time. So in time, because this helps us to give people information ahead of time in terms of the decision they might take to reduce their exposure to air pollution.
Is that over the next 24 hours, or how far ahead can you look?
At the moment, we are doing this over the next 7 days.
Okay.
But the other aspect also is that much as we're aiming to have a high resolution network of sensors, but it's nearly impossible to have a sensor in every place. Because potentially when it comes to air quality, we all breathe in air. If you walk from here to another building, you are breathing in air. Potentially you should have an ability to know the quality of air you breathe in at every point on space. But it's impossible to have a sensor in every place. So we're also leveraging AI to do the prediction in space where we don't have the sensor data. And thanks to the investments we've also gotten from organizations like Google.org, was mentioned earlier on, this has enabled us to kind of demonstrate what AI can do in terms of accelerating action on climate and UN SDGs.
Fantastic. Thanks, engineer. Natalie, can I come to you and
Yeah,
how
I
you're
hope
harnessing?
people aren't surprised that banks use AI as well, a lot. I mean, we've got over 1,000 use cases ongoing. We've been using AI for 10 years or more. We've just got just under 100 generative AI, which, to build on your librarian analogy, and I'm not the first to say it, but I just love this analogy. We're moving from the sort of the web having been indexed with the library to now the librarian's read everything and knows the answers.
Right.
And I just think that's a really cool sort of cutover. So we really have it in 3 zones. It's really for our colleagues, so to sort of change their work, make it easier, the sort of large language modeling, processing all the sort of procedures and policies and so on and so forth. For our clients, we've got chatbot, sort of live, obviously using AI, and then from compliance, where we did actually do a sort of a successful pilot with Google Cloud to sort of do the anti-money laundering. So the extrapolation of that into sustainability, I think, is just phenomenal. Yeah, it's very powerful indeed.
As always, time flies by when you're having fun on the panel. I would like to give the chance to the audience to ask a couple of questions. So I'm going to come to you in a moment after one more round of questions. So please think about questions. I can see Adam in the audience. I'm sure he's got a question. Yeah, I'd love to just get a sense as to what's holding you back in deploying these technologies. What are some of the barriers? Anyone want to?
I can kick off. I mean, climate change is a man-made existential threat. What we don't want is to move from one man-made to another. So we have to be really responsible and ethical in how and be cautious in how we release and understand some of these sort of technologies.
Francis.
I mean, not as an AI even specialist myself, but I think what we can see here is some real examples of AI being used to solve very clear problems, with solutions. Sometimes I feel there's a whole lot of data, and then AI can get involved, and there's a whole new layer of data and complexity that actually takes us. People are then searching for a problem to solve with it, and there's more complexity with this new layer of data. And then everybody, decision-making wise, is completely paralyzed because the data sort of cancels each other out. You know, we're almost like that with the global stock take this year. It's sort of like so much data, no information, and very little wisdom. So it's kind of ensuring that, you know, the way this is harnessed is really focusing on problems to solve in a very pragmatic way.
I think the challenge we are seeing, and I'm assuming you guys as well, is, you know, synchronizing the digital world with the physical world, because the changes and the technology evolve really quickly on the software side, data side, but then it's about farmers making action. It's about large organizations making changes to their infrastructure. That takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. And so how do you do it fast enough, and how do you start with the right or the most urgent problems? And so I think I'll offer a solution as well. In our case, what we've learned is if you start with a problem, because technology can go a lot of places, you can build a lot of stuff, but then learn that they're not exactly what the people need. If you solve backwards, if you go to a rural, a smallholder farmer, and you speak with them and you try to understand, why did they lose crops in the last few years? What prevented them from being more productive? And you solve backwards from this problem. You hear about a flood that happened without an alert, and their field got flooded, whereas if they knew even a day in advance, they could have, dig deeper trenches and avoid that loss. And you say, well, how do I solve that specific problem? Well, I need a better flood model. I need to make sure it gets to them. I need to make sure they trust it, because they've been getting a lot of false alarms in the recent years. And then I start tackling each of these problems separately. That's how we make progress, and it's the same with every other aspect of our adaptation and mitigation strategies.
Andrew.
I love that point, and just maybe to amplify it, to go back to the ticking of the clock, time is short. The decisions we make in the next few years lock in or avoid some of the worst effects of climate change. And I think all of us in this is an incredibly privileged group of institutions structurally. We are well-resourced, we are well-connected, we are staffed by some of the best and brightest people in the world in their respective fields working on these issues. And yet, the two things I think about are, how can we go faster? That's a really critical one. And then, if our ability to build on these tools is accelerating at a self-compounding rate, we're going like this. It isn't the capacity development. I find that term complicating. I would say the ability to absorb these tools and to use them is not moving like this. It's moving like this, as it always does. It's moving, it's not changing day on day. So the most powerful word I heard you say is trust. We have to work together. We have to build bonds of trust across, across categories of difference, and we have to do it quickly. And to me, the work that you're doing, I'll say, is so important in that regard. Bridging and translating across these groups feels like it's the rate-limiting hard thing to do these days.
Thanks, Andrew. Engineer.
Yeah, from our perspective, as I was mentioned earlier on, AI requires, data infrastructure in place. And of course, in our case, we are, deploying and managing a large sensor network. So there's definitely a barrier there in terms of keeping this going and expanding. So hopefully, leveraging expertise here from, satellite imagery as well. I think converging is ground measurements with satellite imagery is perhaps a potential major, follow-up for the future. But the other point is, of course, indeed, as mentioned earlier, how do we ensure that, this AI is actually benefiting people who are most affected? I think that still remains a major challenge, yeah.
Thank you, Engineer. So let's open up. Are there any burning questions in the audience to the panel? Yes, if you perhaps could say who you are and where you're from.
Yes, hi everyone, nice to meet you guys. And my name is Yurei. I'm a student from...
Sorry, just because we've got quite a few folk online, they're going to bring across a microphone for you.
Thank you. My name is Yi-Rui, and I'm a student from China currently studying at the University of Virginia. I'm working on carbon markets, and I'm interested in nature-based solutions. And I see the applications of AI and geographical technologies definitely in this field as well, especially in terms of creating trust. And I'm interested in your perspectives on like how to like further that aspect with the technologies that you are working on. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Andrew, do you want to kick
Yeah,
off?
I'll very quickly because I know we have lots of we'll get to lots of questions. So as you rightly point out, especially in the voluntary carbon markets, particularly in forests based carbon markets, there has been a crisis of trust. There have been really deep questions asked about the genuine additiveness of and climate value of many of these credits. Remote sensing, Earth observation, and AI together specifically are being worked on there's a ton of work and lots being discussed here at the COP about how those technologies can help provide the underlying framework of trust. So let me just give you the really super quick example. So using our remote sensing tools, our satellites, we can see every act of deforestation as it occurs. One of the things we can do is we can combine that remote sensing Earth observation data with something called LiDAR data. The LiDAR data gives us a three-dimensional structure of the forest canopy, and we can find the correspondences between it and the satellite data. From the LiDAR data, we can get biomass, and from biomass, we get carbon. So our organization recently launched products that are entirely AI-powered, that calculate with high degrees of precision all of the above-ground carbon in the forest. And because we can observe it every day, every time there's an act of forest degradation or deforestation, we can actually see the net change in carbon in the system. And an independent measurement, reporting, and verification tool like that is the kind of assessment tool that allows you to trust that if you have it applied to something that, say, for instance, you've issued a carbon credit around, that you know what's happening with the carbon in the credit that you've purchased. And I think there's going to be a lot of activity like that in the years to come. We're going to see these technologies basically hold up markets in ways that they haven't done so far.
Yes, you can. I think Natalie wanted to.
Yeah, I can
Natalie,
sort of,
sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
build on that from obviously a banking perspective. Carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets are really important. But again, it comes down to the trust, the transparency, and the assurance level.
Right.
So even if we have all these technologies and these models, the bank is going to take the responsibility to assure the models, get really confident in them. And carbon markets has had as you say, a big sort of rock to its its trust and the transparency around it. So I don't think it's going to solve it particularly quickly. I think it's had a proper setback, but it's a healthy setback. Yeah. And these models and the way the AI works, the banks are going to have to be able to understand how it works and assure how it works to be confident enough to use them.
Because we're out of time, I'm going to just give the gentleman behind you a chance to ask his question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to narrow the focus down a little bit from my own perspective, and I'd like to understand from all of you all here. Of course, Justin has a lot of role to play in that domain, which is education. Is there any of you that is essentially looking at education, impacting education?
So I can take that. I mean, the answer is yes. We targeting our own people and capabilities and educating our own people, and then obviously our clients as well. But then philanthropically, we are also sort of assuming that the knowledge and education that we can produce using those sort of large language sort of models and AI to basically bring a lot of knowledge to instant, our bankers, absolutely.
Yeah, I can speak a bit to that. So I'm actually chair of the Department of Computer Science at Makerere University in Uganda. So we are impacting on education in different angles, depending on how you see this. So one is, one of the things we feel we should do more of these examples, like the work we're doing at EARCO, is that at least in our context now, we have an example of how AI looks like outside the classroom. And many of our young software engineers and AI engineers are now able to work on a practical project. And this is building into skilling and also enriching our training in computer sciences. But we're also enriching this. We have a program called STEM, where we create data challenges for high schools in terms of what they could do to understand air pollution challenges, but also what they can actually do to improve air quality. So we work with schools to take this data, demonstrate, and build challenges around them. And this is helping build many things. One is to make them aware of the issues, what they can do, but also even studying technical subjects like mathematics and physics, just based on the technology that we already have, being deployed within their contexts. Thank you.
Brilliant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good. Well, look, I'd love to continue. We've covered a huge amount of ground, I think, in a very short space of time. Probably 3 big takeaways for me. One is, of course, we start with the problem and then look at how we can apply these technologies to the problem rather than the other way around. I think, secondly, AI has the potential to be able to help us access insight from vast volumes of, planetary scale volumes of data to draw insight from that. And thirdly, it's introducing these new conversational interfaces so that we can help improve access to the insight to the mass populations. And I think that's a great and exciting and important challenge for all of us collectively. Yeah. I would like to thank the panel for taking the time to come and join us.
And we'd like to thank the moderator.
But I would like to thank the UN Climate Innovation Hub for hosting us, and to Lewis and the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative for allowing us to do the panel. So thank you all for joining, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done.